Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barb Gray. I'm a grower from Mungandai and also from the Darling Downs, and I'm also a director with Cotton Australia. And I also sit on the People panel, which is the panel that Cotton Australia has a relationship with CRDC in advising on the research programs and investments. And I've been asked to chair this session. And we've got a mixed bag this afternoon, and I'm going to get underway now. I'm going to first of all call on Michael Classens, and Michael is with Agri-Food Skills Australia. Michael is the General Manager for Agri-Food Skills Australia. Agri-Food Skills Australia is the key body of skills and workforce development for the Australian agri-food industry and regional Australia. Agri-Food develops and implements workforce development strategies and the industry's nationally endorsed qualifications to meet the current and emerging needs of agri-food enterprises, employees and students throughout regional and urban Australia. Agri-Food Skills Solutions is the fee-for-service and consulting business division of Agri-Food Skills Australia. They have been engaged by CRDC to support CRDC and Cotton Australia in the development of a cotton industry workforce strategy. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much. I believe we have to stand here behind the mic so we can be recorded, otherwise I'd be standing there without the barrier. Thanks for that introduction. Just before we get started, I started in this position about almost 7 years ago. I'm an economist by training. I had no sort of skills and training background, but I was selected to work in this position in Agri-Food Skills Solutions to help engagement and collaboration in our industries, and particularly with food processing and big agribusiness. Two anecdotes when I started was talking workforce development and training was always a very difficult sell because it has its own jargon, it's largely incomprehensible to the uninitiated. And I quickly discovered on ringing old contacts, because I used to do investment work, like the CEO of Simplot, I rang him up and said, I'm doing workforce development skills and training work now. Can I come and talk to you? And the first thing he did was handball straight to his HR and personnel. He said, I run a big company, Mike, got all sorts of problems on the frozen goods. Go and talk to HR. And I quickly learned that, I was talking the wrong language, first of all. And secondly, another anecdote, so we were working with a food organisation business in Cowra, around energy skills at the time, the program we were running with them. A fellow made a huge saving. He was working on a retort, these sort of high pressure steam cookers that cook your yoghurt, the fruit that go in your yoghurt. And he'd come up with an idea which saved $4,000 operating costs on the electricity bills on this retort machine. And the CEO was walking with me and congratulating. He said, well done, John, on that $4,000 saving. Why didn't you come up with the idea before now? And he said, well, no one ever expletive deleted. No one ever asked me. And those two moments, I suppose, set a parenthesis, you could say, around this whole issue of workforce development. It's actually about people, and it's actually about getting real results and bottom line results. So it's not a you can get lost in the jargon, but very much it's about people and it's about very tangible outcomes. We've heard some of those this morning. I think it's in plenary, which I'll mention as I go through. So I'm just going to work out which one to touch here first. I won't go through who we are. You've just heard we're a private division or services division of Agri-Food Skills Australia. What are we here for? We're here to present a draft strategy, a workforce development strategy for the cotton industry. We're providing feedback right now, so this will be a very short presentation and then we'll have time for questions. And of course we'll stick around afterwards. And there will also be forms that will be available which will be distributed at the end, so you can throw down your ideas, and both critical and positive, of course, and we'll then shape that up with CRDC, who funded this program, into the final report. What sources have we used? Well, I think several people have mentioned Ruth Nettle, but just before I do, first of all, there's a number of documents, some of which you may be aware of and some not, which talk about workforce development, people skills, HR and those sort of things. The first of those is the Strategic R&D Plan, the CRDC, the Cotton Australia Strategic Plan, and the Cotton Industry Vision 2029, all of whom have little sections that if you search through around issues that relate to workforce and skills and people skills. Ruth Nettle, Melbourne University, also Sydney University's Workplace Research Centre have done a lot of work over recent years that we've helped, we've drawn on, of course, and particularly Ruth Nettle's work, which has run up to the very recent past, to help finalise the strategy. And I wanted to single out Ian Taylor from CRDC, Angela Bradburn, Sophie Davison from Cotton Australia, provide a lot of support into the project. And Boyce, Chartered Accountants, got a mention too, not least of all because we looked at a lot of their documents over the last 3 months that we've been finalising this work. Ruth Nettle Research, the actual project was a UM 1201 called Cotton Workforce Development for Sustainable Competitive Advantage. Lots of survey work, lots of interviews, census data built on to develop little case studies, which at the end of the day, this has to make a difference on farm, and that's what this strategy is about. So it's not about highfalutin strategic stuff, although it's got that. It's about making it work on the farm. So we've used a lot of those case studies, and in the case of what Ruth did here in 4 valleys that are there on the slide. We've also done some very more recent validation. I wanted to draw attention to Gillian Smith, one of our team. I should have drew attention to her in the beginning, who's done a validation, going out to talk to people, to cross-check against Ruth Nettle's work and the other research work by talking to people, talking to farmers. And you can see that the major ones we've spoken to there, trying to get a bit of a cross-section and to cross-check that against earlier research and case studies. Glenn Rogan from the Bennelong property, a very large operation. Some of these people might be in the room, or you'll probably certainly know of these people. Rob Jacobs, who's kind of a representative of small to medium-sized properties. Ed Willis, Stuart Armitage, who represents the Darling Downs Cotton Growers Inc., and John McVeigh, who is now Shadow Minister but was previously Queensland Minister for Ag. A lot more details available on what came out of those consultations, and that's certainly helped direct us in different ways in the running out and developing the strategy. Before we get into the strategy, just to put ourselves on the same wavelength, what's the employment profile look like in the cotton industry? Generally, again, this will be no surprise to most of you. We're small employers, average 6.6 people on a farm. If you translate that to the whole of the country, maybe there's around 8,000 people working full through to part-time in the cotton industry. Most of these full-time, so you get 60%, through to casuals about 28%. This, as you would expect, would vary a lot depending on the seasons and the climate and water availability. But this is the most recent data. Employment overall in the ag industry, and that's that third dot point, it's been declining. And that's a natural thing, that's structural adjustment, that's higher scale, it's mechanisation, which you've seen in a much stronger way, arguably, than some other sectors even. But massive reductions in the people, in the numbers being employed, and there's certainly some numbers that have circulated in agriculture in general that haven't probably helped. Start talking about 100,000 vacancies and that sort of thing, which isn't actually true. It might be true if you're talking about casuals and seasonals, but in terms of the long, permanent labour force, and both professional through to low skill, it's been in decline, and that's a natural process. General upward pressure in wages as well. People expecting to be paid more and needing to be paid more, and that reflects a higher level of skills that are required to operate, not least of all, more complex machinery and technologies. Consolidation is king. You're getting bigger farm size. It's increased by 13% in the case of cotton. At the same time, a lot more mixed farming going on. A lot of it also probably in the south valleys than anywhere else. And that, of course, reflects and feeds into the employment profile and the way you approach, and the way we're suggesting that we approach and continue to approach employment and skills. again, just setting the picture, mid-manager, supervisory roles and paraprofessional roles. A lot of demand for that. In the past, we've sort of had a pyramidic structure where you got the owner manager down to some middle management, and you got a lot of people at low skill levels. And generally in agriculture, and you're seeing that in cotton as well, it's becoming more like a diamond shape, fatter in the middle where you've got a smaller cohort but of highly skilled people needed, and apart from seasonal need, less at the lower skilled end. Much higher dependency on contractors, and again, I'm telling you what you already know here, but it's just useful to confirm it. Everybody more or less uses contractors to some degree, if not just for ground preparation or planting or harvesting. Heavy reliance on overseas workers, another facet that affects the strategy. 457s feature there, and also 417, of course. What's interesting is that we don't employ, relative to other industries, that many. And part of that is we've been a little bit relatively unsuccessful, actually, in applying for that. There's a whole lot of political issues for that, a lot of other sort of factors at play. Indigenous, again, an area where probably like any other sector, it struggles a little bit, but there's been some real shafts of light there. CRDC's funded some really clever projects, and now there's a lot more funding flowing in from federal government through Prime Minister and Cabinet where Indigenous finds itself, which we'll highlight later as well, that need to be considered and thought about. So why a workforce strategy? Why do we need one? There's a whole lot of reasons you can give for this. The first of all is that, a lot of, whether it's a business plan you have for your own farm, right through to an industry-wide or government strategy for an industry, to get more export competitive, to be more innovative, to employ more, to make, get a higher turnover. The premise is the skills and people are there. Often that premise is faulty or it falls short of the reality, because we all know we struggle for enough people and enough people with the right skills. Well, not everyone does, and that's a key point. Some don't, and we need to look at the formula for why they don't struggle as much. We don't get maximum efficiency for the training that we do and effectiveness, so you can be sure that you're training in the right way and in an effective way, not wasting money. Traction and retention is the key thing. It just keeps, how do we get people to come and join? How do we get them to stay? Big issue. So you need a strategy to start thinking about that, because it's not just one solution. It's not just about the training. Training is certainly a key element, but it's not the only one, and that's probably where some confusion tends to enter. Lots of good things being done in HR and training. Do they align with the overall objectives of the industry? So there's a few reasons, there's lots more you can think of why you need a strategy. So it's about bringing together, looking at what we're doing and trying to create to link it back to where the industry is trying to go. Often when we go to a farm or food company, we start talking workforce development. There's often not a business plan as such. It's very hard to start talking about planning numbers of people and the skills they need and everything else when you can't relate it back to the objectives of the business. What is workforce development? Well, again, I just sort of go, it's a bit like a 101 in workforce development, I know, but it's probably good to be on the same page. Just very quickly, you could say it's a bit like a house. It's completely, the success or failure of it is dictated by the business skills of the owner and the management, really, at the end of the day. Set the tone and the ambience for the whole operation, and without that, you can train as much as you like, you'll struggle and you'll continue to have high staff turnover, etc. So that roof, you might say, sets the whole tone for that, getting successful workforce development going. And it's about a whole lot of components to the business that you might not think about, but which are fundamental. At the base, really, it's about workplace conditions. We heard that a little bit about that this morning as well in one of the plenaries. I'm thinking particularly of one farm, the Reardons, who gave, in a sense, a little précis workforce development strategy just in one short case when he was talking about the Monsanto nomination that he has. Workplace conditions, what it's like to work there. Workforce planning, numbers of people, how many do I really need and what sort of jobs are they? How do I define them? Attraction and induction, once I get people joining, what's the process for introducing them into the company about how we do work here? And to do it safely, so work health and safety is obviously there. Work systems and job roles, things that you might not think about, You might think, well, I'm employing 6 people on a farm. It's not quite as demanding a need. Certainly, as you get bigger, these things become much more important. People need to know what their role is, and you need to put a fair bit of thought into it. Retention and retirement. It's probably an overdone cliche that if you can't retain, you can't attract. But it's there's a lot of truth to that. People will want to join come to the farm through word of mouth, because not only is it pleasant, but you get rewarded, you get valued, you get trained. There's a lot of issues there regarding how you some of which isn't obvious, and some of it's almost very clear, but sometimes gets forgotten. Skills utilisation. People have skills that we may not know about in a place where it's difficult to get people to join. Often some of those skills that you need are actually in the people already on the books, already working for you. It's only about trying to find out what those skills are, and there's a certain approach you can conduct to that. Career pathways and transitions. Again, difficult on a small farm, but possible between farms and within regions. Giving people, younger people, this new Gen X and the Ys and the Zs and those who will come after, a way they can see that they want to stay and work in the sector, maybe in your company or between farms. Innovation, adaptability, again, that comes from good capability, industry leadership, business capability. Again, the Reardons mentioned how they use the latest technology, the latest equipment, and how that's a great way to enthuse the workforce. They're working with good equipment and they feel valued. A lot's already been done, a huge amount, and this was what I found particularly impressive, I think, in those who worked on the strategy, was at the general level around schools, and CRDC in Cotton Australia doing a lot of work. The University Vocational Systems is pretty responsive. There's a lot of extension services being provided. In leadership, I've listed a few there. There are others that are missing, but Rural Leadership Program, Future Cotton Leaders, Young Farming Champions, Trail, Peter Cullen Trust. There's lots of really good and effective things that have great feedback from participants that are happening. And in the area of business skills and employer and technical skills, MyBNP is the main vehicle, as I'm sure most of you know. Cotton Info and initiatives like that as well linked with it. So a lot of activity and a lot of really good things happening that we looked at and had a bit of a chance to think about. What are the challenges though? Just to recap what I've just said, and then I'll go into the strategy itself. At the most simple level, labour gaps. We need people to fill jobs. Skills gaps, different thing. We might have the people, but can they do the job? Another issue. Business gaps, and this is where I talk about workforce development. What are the gaps in the business, in the systems? It could be something as prosaic as job descriptions, which may not exist or may not be up to date for how the business is changing. Needs gaps. Is the training that's being done really targeted to the need? Can be an open question. Obviously, if you need it to get a permit or licence or something, you can't operate something without that licence, then it's an obvious one. But there's a lot less obvious gaps as well. Knowledge gaps, just having the right information, and sometimes that's not a given. The challenge is then, cotton is generally regarded as a fairly small industry in relative terms, in terms of the number of players, but it's also been one of the most innovative because it's much more cohesive than some other agricultural sectors. The challenge then is to convert that success and innovation, because of that cohesiveness, to a much more sustainable and strategic approach to workforce development. That's the aim of the strategy, to attract, retain, develop people, and through that to drive industry competitiveness. So all those words are summarised in that one statement. Again, something maybe to be thought about. I think people might have a view, it's wrong emphasis or something like that, but that's the current aim of the strategy. Scope's just about farms. There's a huge amount happening in the broader education training system and in the supply chain that benefits industry as well. We haven't looked at that specifically. It'd be too large for the task. There's no explicit analysis in the strategy either for broader agricultural programs that benefit the cotton industry. So it's very much about specific cotton initiatives that can make a difference on farm. That's a sort of a summary. The actual document we don't have here is about runs to 70 pages plus appendices. We will have a summary to hand out that Cotton Australia has prepared facility see afterwards, so you can delve down a little bit, so that not to overload you with too much information. This gives you a bit of a feeling for what's this trying to do. Well, those 4 circles contain outcomes. So the object here is that at the end of 2 to 3 years, as time goes by, you're going to have cotton businesses looking at the very top circle that really understand their workforces and have effective plans to address their future needs. Now, that's easy to say, but what that needs is good data, good information. You know, have a labour skill analysis to actually set the benchmark about how many jobs are there, what are the requirements for skills in those jobs, where are the gaps, where are the gaps, so that resources and energy can be put in to fill those gaps in a strategic way. And that comes down to an individual farm, so you can actually fill the gaps in a more effective way, and with help, with the help of the peak organisations and other growers. Looking at the left-hand side, cotton businesses to build and benefit from a more capable workforce. So that's very much about working within the organisation, and I mentioned skills utilisation. There's a whole lot of other aspects that we've covered. We won't go into all the detail. One of those is being able to look at people's learnings, what they already know, what they're capable of doing, and training. Training, a lot of which is already available and already being done, but where can we do it smarter and a bit sharper? So another sort of message here is we're looking at a smaller workforce, more highly skilled, and training very specifically for high-level skill requirements and high-level skills, which I'll come to now. The very bottom one there, the bottom circle, cotton farm businesses are rewarding and desirable places in which to work. At the minimum, they need to be safe, so people need to be compliant with WH&S. But it may be an overused, certainly in academic circles, perhaps an overused term, in becoming an employer of choice. That people choose because they want to work with you. How do you acquire that reputation? And it's not by chance. If you look at the successful operators in the cotton industry and in other ag businesses, they've gone about it in a very structured way. And one of the first ways is to start to be honest with yourself. Say, well, what's it like to work here? Are our management skills? Do people feel led, inspired, motivated? Do they understand the business plan? Do they know where their part in what we're trying to achieve? Because all these factors, apart from the physicality of what it's like to work there, have an impact. Last, how am I going for time away?
You've got to be another 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah, that's right. On the right-hand side, cotton industry people have effective business management and leadership skills. And I've said this about 10 times, 10 different ways, I know. But there's a whole lot of activities there that we're recommending happen. One of which is to evaluate the existing programs, those leadership programs I mentioned, to see how they're tracking, where they can be modified and improved, and perhaps new types of courses introduced, and to basically also, without going into too much of the details about the recommendations, helping students, vet students, university students, be exposed to high-performing workplaces. For one thing, that certainly that they start to think more seriously about a career in the industry, and that word gets around, and getting that message around. If there's something, I suppose, behind that, I'll come to the next slide and I'll just summarise. And these are just, again, just messages from the strategy that relate to some of the recommendations. As I've said, there's a lot of really, really good workforce development and training initiatives already underway. These need to be evaluated a little bit more and brought into a more cohesive strategy. This is some of the things we're saying. There's a need to analyse the labour situation and the skills gaps, sort of set a benchmark so you actually know how you're improving. Without that, we really can't, or struggle. More focus on business skills and business leadership. And more focus on that employer culture, employer of choice, creating that ambience. And as I said, it's a complex beast. It's not a simple question of training, although training has a big part to play. That final dash point, I'd say, is probably one of the most important. As I said at the outset, I don't care about workforce development, I don't care about training, I don't care about education outcomes. I care about how my business is performing. So you tell me how any of this will make a difference to my bottom line, and you win me. Part of what we're suggesting is that a more intense effort around measuring the return on investment to training. Now, some of that's easy because work health and safety shows you, for one thing, there's less safety incidents. That's easy to work out. Sometimes a little bit more opaque around technical skills. You know, it seems like you learn a new technique or a better way of harvesting or something. It's harder to see, but it's about measurement and doing a lot more measurement of the data, so you can start to see and start to win people over. You'll find that after a while people start to say, well, if they can do it, well, I can do it too. So it's about building confidence with good information on the actual dollar returns. And the good news is there's a lot of the platforms already there in place. Key among which is MyBNP. It already has an HR module, and there's more that can be done. Cotton Info is linked to that as well. There's a lot of advisors out there really equipped with a good network. The last dash point there reflects a sort of a recommendation we've made to look at the dairy industry much more closely, which among all of the ag and food sectors is probably the most sophisticated on workforce development. They've spent really the last 7 years working very hard and had some false dawns as well, so cotton industry can avoid some of those mistakes and look at things that work, one of which is this ESCI project, which is employer starter kit that you can use very quickly to employ people and be not only compliant but be interactive and know how to manage your staff better. So I'll just go back to the diagram to finish. We're looking for feedback now. We've got some time for questions, and I'll just put that diagram up so we've got something to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm sorry that we were 15 minutes late in starting the session, which was out of our control. What would you like from us now? There's a few ways we can go about this. I do also see that we've got afternoon tea will be up here. We can do, I can see Ian standing up. So what would you like to get from this session? Handouts? Yes.
So what we're really interested in doing is be able to gather people's feedback in relation to the strategy and be able to collate that.
Yes.
As we've said, the strategy is not finalised. What we're doing is we're trying to refine the strategy and make sure it actually fits the cotton industry as we move forward. Michael's emphasised the key point that people are the future of this industry, important elements in terms of business, capability, understanding what our people actually require, ensuring we've got the framework in place is important. So this is an opportunity for everyone to contribute in terms of the development and finalisation.
Yes. Yes. So given that we've got probably 1 minute before our next speaker starts, hand them out. And then how can people get that feedback back to you? Back to Angela?
Actually also have, and maybe we'll hand out that as well as Gillian has done a specific feedback form.
Okie doke.
For the strategy. So.
And Gillian works with Agri-Food, so yes.
We'll hand out both of them at the end of the day.
Yes.
Come and talk to myself by Ian.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I thought, if I may just ask, Ian, I think for the benefit of people in the room, would you just give a quick summary of the people in the ESCI project, the CRDC investing? Because I think we know about BNP, but it will provide a really enhancement.
Is this Ian to do this? Yes. So, sorry, this is a bit, we're making this up on the run. You can see this, can't you? Thank you very much, Michael. And like I said, if we can actually have our afternoon tea up here, then we can get some of this feedback. And I'll just ask Ian from CRDC.
Thanks, Paul. So this is just a 20-second, I guess, delivery. The People in Dairy site has been developed over a number of years, as Michael said, and actually contains a whole range of resources. When Bruce Pike was in with CRDC, we actually started an initiative with dairy and GRDC and MLA to be able to bring that People in Dairy site, create that into the People in Ag, and actually have that available to cotton growers. We do have a project currently running with dairy to be able to bring and make available the People in Dairy site or the People in Ag site to the industry. Now that site contains a whole load of templates and the legal framework for human resources and industrial relations. So if you're looking for things like job descriptions, you know, what do I need to be paying people that are employed on my farm, that's all available in that site. In the last couple of days, we've spoken to Shane Helwegi from Dairy Australia, and we've gotten permission to create that linkage straight into MyBMP. So now you'll actually be able to access the People in Dairy site straight through the MyBMP website. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Ian, very much. And I've been working on the People panel now for quite a few years, and one of the challenges we've always had is, you know, working with people is always, as Michael said, you know, we have all those touchy-feely motherhood statements, and so what we're really trying to do is get a good feeling on return on investment on, you know, everybody says people are our, you know, good people are our most important resource, but what does that actually mean for the bottom line of your business? And as Michael said, the gutser is the return on investment. And our next speaker, Phil Alchin, if you heard Phil before in the main plenary, he works with Boyce Chartered Accountants, and they've been working with the cotton industry for many years doing, you don't call it benchmarking, it's cotton comparative analysis. And we're now starting to bring the measurement of people into this space as well. So I'd like to now introduce Phil. He's been a director at Boyce Moree since July 2005, having joined the firm in June 2000. He has a Bachelor of Business, is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Australia, and has a diploma in financial planning. He has been a director of Boyce Moree since July 2005, having joined the firm in June 2000, and we're just about to repeat what I've already said there. So Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Barb. I guess first things, I was probably a little bit more prepared today for a panel session and a question and answer session, but nonetheless, I have a few notes, and so we'll work through those and we'll see how we go, and we'll see if we can answer some questions at the end. The topic I was presented with was the return on investment of a skilled workforce, and I guess in terms of the work that we've been doing, we're probably not quite at the level yet to actually quantify that in dollar terms, but what I wanted to share with you today was some more discussion on how you maximise your return on investment through the I guess the way that you manage your workforce, and I guess that's based anecdotally on our experience with the cotton comparative analysis, but also our 40 years of experience in dealing with agricultural clients and working closely with agricultural clients at a really operational level. One of the things that struck us over the years dealing with agricultural enterprises of all sizes is that an enterprise's ability to grow and continue to generate profits and continue to increase those profits typically is limited by the business owner's ability to manage, the business owner's ability to manage people, manage finances, you know, manage generally. And so absolutely there are some fantastic farmers, graziers, cotton growers who are just great sole traders, and they will make a profit year in, year out doing it themselves. But of course that's capped. You know, their ability to grow that business and to double that profit or triple that profit is capped at you know, their ability to do that. And you know, sometimes there's a variety of reasons why they might decide to do that as well, just in terms of, you know, it's a whole lot easier to be making all the decisions yourself and not have to be explaining yourself and to be doing those things. I guess the other thing that we've learned over the years is that timing of operation and attention to detail is key for an agricultural business. You know, so typically in growing a cotton crop, there'll be 20 or 30 small decisions made during the cropping cycle. Each of those combined have a significant impact on the yield of that crop during the year. And I guess in terms of timing of operation and attention to detail, you know, it's really the motivation of the workforce and the alignment with your organisational goals that that will have the biggest impact in terms of getting those decisions right and being able to leverage so that your employers are making those decisions right. I'm just going to work through a few key areas that we see that the best agricultural businesses are doing well. I was going to start with remuneration and benefits, and automatically we think of pay and we think of dollars, and based on our experience, pay is one small part of it. Remuneration in regional Australia is made up of a number of components. Pay, obviously. Employee housing is a key part of it, particularly in regional areas. The old saying, happy wife, happy life, rings true in that regard. So it's not just about the employer necessarily, it's about housing, it's about location, it's about schooling, it's about all of these things, and that's an important part of a remuneration package. I guess similarly within the remuneration package, or a benefits package as we see it, is learning. Not just, structured learning, but also learning on the job, and the ability for people to improve their skills and apply those skills. I guess the other part we see of that, in terms of that learning, in terms of that mentoring, are the ability to have hard conversations with your team. And we see that as part of sort of remuneration, benefits, the whole package, development of people. Hard conversations are hard to have, but in terms of actually developing people, and Michael and I were only just talking about this earlier, soft skills are hard to develop in team members, really at the end of the day, if you think about discussions that you've got to have with people in terms of improving their ability to interact with others, to manage others, there's typically some tough conversations that come with that, uncomfortable conversations, but conversations that if happen in a respectful way can be extremely valuable. The second thing I wanted to talk about was employee involvement in decision making. I guess over the years what we've seen is that with the best operators, they have their team involved in key decisions at all sorts of levels. Sometimes those levels, and I guess it depends on the employee and where they fit within the organisation. Some of those decisions will be very much at a paddock level, at an operational level. Some of those decisions will flow through to a budget level. The key concept is about involvement in decision making, but then also some accountability where people are involved in the decision making. So accountability both in terms of what result did we end up as a result of making those decisions. That's easy at a higher level in terms of budgeting, obviously. Dollars and cents speak for themselves, but potentially also other benchmarks and KPIs. And often it comes back to simple things like is there a Monday meeting where we write the goals for the week up on a whiteboard that everybody can sign up to and have a clear understanding of the week ahead. The third thing, which will sound pretty fundamental, probably to a lot in the room, who might be working in larger organisations, but are written agreements. Written agreements, not just in terms of an industrial relations perspective, but more in terms of aligning goals and being very clear in terms of expected outcomes for the team. And we find that if things are written down, it removes the potential for miscommunication and conflict. Hugely important with employees. WH&S. WH&S, look, obviously it's an obligation. Compliance goes without saying. It's important with WH&S that it has a practical grounding in the organisation. So it's not just based around legal obligations, but it's actually based around genuine care for safety for employees, and also that it really is implemented right through the permanent staff, the casuals and the contractors, and there's a genuine desire by all stakeholders for safety in the workplace. Bonuses are an interesting conversation that we have with our clients, bonus schemes. Bonus schemes in agriculture have always seemed to be tricky beasts. I guess one of the interesting things in establishing bonus schemes is that often the team are working harder in years where you make the less money. You know, they're doing all sorts of tough things. They're making, you know, ends meet. So often, you know, if you think about some of the years, some of the cotton years that we've had with, you know, really hot summers over the last couple of years, lots of waters, you know, and we haven't necessarily ended up with the greatest result in terms of yield, but the team's worked really hard. Aligning a financial bonus can really be tricky. The other thing with bonuses is the simpler they are, the better they are. The simpler they are, the easier they are to understand. And in fact, it's interesting now, while I guess it contradicts what I've spoken about just in terms of alignment in tough years, one of the things we're starting to see is that a production bonus can be a very simple incentive for an employee. It's really easy to understand. Probably don't end up necessarily with 100% alignment, but you end up with very close alignment to the organisational goals. So, you know, dollars per bale, dollars per tonne. It's really easy to understand. It's really easy to measure. You know, and then there's some broad-based alignment with the organisational goals. Yield is king. Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was, I guess, contractors versus employees. And one of the things I was talking about this morning was obviously with reduced water availability in the northern valleys, an eye on fixed costs you know, becomes important in a reduced water year. And often, you know, faced with the challenge of, particularly when you look at, you know, key staff and you look at your investment in plant, that you want to hang on to your key staff, you know, through the dry period, because you know when it turns it'll be hard to get them back. You know, similarly, you make an investment in plant, you know, for timing of operation, but that plant's sitting in the shed potentially, you know, when it's dry, you're wearing the risk instead of a contractor. One of the things I guess we're starting to see, which seems to be working well, is developing deeper relationships with contractors. Developing deeper relationships in that you give up a bit more of your profit in the good years by you know, letting that contractor take on more of the work. You know, based on the fact that that contractor has good gear and has good team members, but also on the basis that that contractor knows that in a tough year, you know, he'll be the first to miss out, but because he's making a bit more from you in the good years, he'll be back. And he'll maintain his equipment and he'll maintain his staff. Absolutely, you're giving up a bit more in the tough year, but you're saving giving up a bit more in the good year, but you're saving yourself a bit in the tough year. And we're actually seeing those relationships starting to work really well. Interestingly, I just wanted to note, so Associate Professor Ruth Nettle from the University of Melbourne, she's doing another project at the moment, I think, on staff turnover in the cotton industry, and within that, we contacted some clients and participants in the cotton comparative analysis on her behalf to participate in that survey. And just as a bit of a check, we contacted Ruth and just ran through some of the thoughts that were coming out of her questionnaires to the participants, and a lot of those things were echoed through that you know, involving your team, you know, I guess involving your team in decision making, upskilling your team, you know, the importance of in terms of remuneration, not just about dollars, but about housing and schooling and all of those things. Yeah, so I guess they're the key points, and not sure if you had any questions coming out of that.